How you doing, Mac?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Got some good comics next week, so that's exciting.
Yeah. There were we talked a little bit briefly earlier about our picks of the week without actually telling each other what they are. But yeah, I feel like we had a somewhat easy choice this week.
I think so, but we'll find out if we agree. So, want to start with Ten of Swords?
Yeah, might as well jump right back into what is now absolute craziness.
So, I'm actually really pleased. We'll start with Marauders.
Yeah.
I kind of expected the Ten of Swords thing to be like some major splash page battle, sort of like Secret Wars type thing.
Mhm.
And this is more like just little contests, like Olympics. Uh, and they're not. It's not just, despite the fact that it's Ten of Swords. They're weird things like, uh, you know, playing a drinking game or not dying.
Yeah,
And
dying was one of the contests apparently.
yeah,
Arm wrestling. So yeah, there was a lot to like about these Ten of Swords issues. I also kind of just thrown off by all of it, to be honest. Like you said, like I was expecting the same. I thought this was going to be some big 10-on-10 or 10-on-9 battle, and it's not that at all.
well, in the same when we'll start talking about Marauders 15, although they all sort of blend together.
Yeah,
When I first picked it up, I was like, did I miss something?
right.
Because last time we knew Wolverine killed the woman here, and you go like, okay, and then suddenly everything just there was the whole Marvel universe was gone, and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like I missed something. Like in that, normally Marvel books have that sort of exposition page,
Mhm.
and in this one you're like, wait, the Avengers and Fantastic Four and all these people were involved. Wait, what? But then as you get into it, you get into it, and I feel bad for the unicorns that died to make this issue happen.
Yeah, I totally fell for that fake out. I thought, it was like, oh wow, maybe Ten of Swords, maybe they built this whole thing up to just kind of swerve and throw us all off completely. Um, Obviously, that doesn't last very long. We get back to the actual Ten of Swords story, but for a second there, they had me going. I thought we were going to have a very different story, and I mean, granted, we still do, but very different in a different way. This is what they make you think for a second there. I did like this issue. The Marauders issue last week was my favorite of the Ten of Swords because of this whole like night before the battle or contest dinner where Saturnine is getting both sides together. They're all mingling, getting to know each other, which is kind of weird when you are thinking you have to kill each other the next day. But made for this really cool almost like Hunger Games kind of vibe, which was a lot of fun. And that just continues here. So I did like this issue. My favorite thing about this one is they gave you betting odds as to who would win the tournament for each individual character, which was really cool. I honestly just I spent way too much time just analyzing that page and breaking down the odds and everything because I'm that kind of nerd. But yeah, no, I really liked this issue.
I did too. And if I had to pick a top Ten of Swords issue, I don't know if I'd pick that one or the recent issue of Excalibur, number 14. Just because Cypher here is just a lot of fun. Like that whole bit. It's in a world with mega mutants and Apocalypse and Wolverine, it's nice to have sort of like that innocent perspective. Which he provides in this, and I think is really going to change that whole dynamic moving forward.
Yeah, I definitely really like Cypher as a character in this story. But we've talked about Ten of Swords as sort of this big, complex sort of thing that we're at times lost. And recently it's been getting down to like the actual contest. And we're like, all right, you know what? I'm in. I'm ready for this to start going. And the Marauders issue had me just like that. We're getting this started. Here we go. And we got into Excalibur, and I have no idea what's going on. Like we said, completely changed everything we expected from Ten of Swords, and this one in particular I mean, is it spoilery to say that there's a wedding involved?
No, and you get points for the wedding.
Right. Yeah, you get points to both sides, I guess. This was a very strange issue. It's enjoyable for sure. It's definitely fun. Like you said, Cypher is a great character. There are just a ton of great characters in this. I love Magic. I love Apocalypse. And then obviously Betsy Braddock. There's a lot happening. The contest officially starts, and we've said it. It's just not at all what we thought it was going to be.
Yeah, and then you get into Wolverine, number 7, and this like you have these big spanning issues, and then this one seems a little bit more quaint. And just Wolverine getting punished for the super Wolverine decisions he's made, and it's. I don't know. What do you think?
I liked it. I liked that this issue was contained within this ridiculous tournament. And that's kind of all you're seeing here. Also, the art in this one is the winner for the week, because there are some panels that I stopped and just stared at, and not just for betting odds. There were like some really awesome panels. I probably have a new background to set on my iPad later today. Really, really cool artwork. So that was definitely very enjoyable. Wolverine, of course, is just a great character. He's never been my favorite, but I find myself enjoying his, these issues more and more every time I read them. So yeah, no, I really liked it. I'm still confused by the tournament and what's exactly happening. I don't even really know who the villain of this story is anymore, but I'm sort of in for the ride as I'm reading it. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, I felt like this was the best week of Ten of Swords. Like, now that we're getting into it, it still had the fun sort of interpersonal stuff that you don't know. I wasn't really expecting going into 10 versus 10 kind of thing.
Right.
But it also kind of, you started keeping score. You started having betting odds. We started moving into the contest while still keeping the interpersonal stuff, which I thought was. It struck a nice balance.
Yeah. By the way, my biggest issue with these 3 issues today was that the betting odds were inconsistent from one comic to the next. That just bothered me a little bit.
But they change as the contest goes on.
Well, sure, but Isco went from a 2-1 favorite to a 100-1 underdog apparently in a day. So I don't know how the lines move, but yeah, that bothered me a little bit.
Yeah, there's no way Jonathan Hickman wasn't all on top of that and have some weird explanation for all of this.
Probably.
So moving on from Ten of Swords, going into the next chapter of the Last Remains story in Amazing Spider-Man. I like Last Remains. I didn't love this issue. I kind of felt like it was more of the name is escaping me of the villain.
Oh, Kindred.
Kindred, yeah. Kindred just saying the same thing he's been saying since since the Sin Eater story started, and Peter Parker going like, still wants to be like, no, take my sins, like all that. Like, I just feel like we've been down this road before, and coming out of the Doctor Strange issue last time, like I felt like we were getting somewhere, and I mean there are some consequences for her spider friends, but like I kind of just felt like it was a lot of monologuing again that we already heard.
Yeah, that's fair. And so actually I'm a little bit surprised because I thought this was the one that we were on board with. This is my big and yeah, no, you're right. This is to me, it was a lot of buildup to get to this issue, but I have been anticipating this moment of, and I don't really want to spoil it. So Peter meeting Kindred face to face in a way that has been teased in previous issues that digs up quite literally a lot of Peter's past. So I was really excited for that moment, and it delivered. I
the moment I'm waiting for is when Peter finds out who Kindred is.
well, that was one thing I wanted to ask you, actually, if you think that we're going to get that from this story, or are they going to build Kindred up and save him for a bigger story down the line? I'm curious. I could see it going either way.
I feel like, well, and we didn't. I don't know. I don't know if you read it, but there was another issue. The .lrs that we didn't assign this week. But if you read that issue, it talks about there's a lot of interplay between Mary Jane Watson and Norman Osborn, and I feel like once Norman Osborn spills the beans to Mary Jane, like it's only a matter of time before it gets to Peter Parker.
True. Yeah.
So I know that's sort of unfair to bring up something that we didn't assign, but yeah, and like I don't know if it's just because I saw maybe like a press preview or something, like on one of the comic sites, but yeah, it's like I kind of knew we were gonna have the ghosts of Peter's past come up, but I liked it. It just felt like it was it's a short comic. It's 20 pages, and it just felt like it was a lot of Kindred monologuing.
Yeah, I think I'm very into Kindred as a villain, and I think that what really told me that I was really enjoying this comic was I started it, I flipped a couple pages, and I was done. I didn't even realize I was near the end. I never once checked the page count to see where I was at. I just ended it. It was just finished that quickly. So
really, it felt like I had the same feel. Like I felt it finishes quickly, but I kind of felt like it was too quickly.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, I'm looking forward to see where this goes.
And in fairness, I read this like super dense Ten of Swords issues right before this, so like it's kind of like a solid blast. But
yeah, that definitely makes a big difference too. That probably influences how we are, enjoying these comics each week, because whether it's the way that you looked at it, like, well, it ended too quickly, I didn't, get the satisfying ending. Or for me, it was like, all right, this huge, crazy story, now I'm ready for something, simple. So it could really go either way. But for me, yeah, I definitely really like this issue and just love Kindred. Everything about this character is great.
I agree. I'm just ready for him to, and maybe it's just because he's been the man behind the curtain for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, it's nice to see Peter kind of face him, but he doesn't really face him. You know what I mean?
Right.
So my pick of the week was actually Taskmaster #1, a new limited series that was probably intended to tie into the Black Widow film release.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just basically sold anytime you have a super villain, hero, whatever you want to call Taskmaster in this story, that has a Dolly Parton ringtone.
Yeah, that was that moment. Those couple pages were so cinematic to me. Like as I was reading it, I heard the song in my head. I could hear the sound effects of the golf cart and everything. I just want to see that on the screen. It is a little disappointing to me that this version of Taskmaster is not what we're going to get in the MCU, at least from what we can tell from the trailers. But it's a very, very different version of the character there. And he's such a great character.
He is. And having Maria Hill, the new Nick Fury, Phil Coulson, like Okoye involved, to me, that's just sort of, we've been so focused lately, I think, in sort of the I don't want to say cosmic, but big MCU, Krakoa, the Kree, the Skrull, that, the sort of on the ground SHIELD folks, like we haven't really spent much time with at all. And it's nice to be like, oh yeah, here they are.
Yeah. This I really enjoyed this issue, and you mentioned that your pick of the week was very easy, and I said, well, it was the same for me until I got to that last one and made it a lot more difficult, and that was this issue. I definitely really, really enjoyed this, and yeah, I agree. Getting that back to these smaller stories is nice. He's so goofy in this comic, and this character has been on the comedy side of things in some issues before, but typically more business focused. Whereas this one, he's like really almost Deadpool-esque
Yeah.
with his banter with some of the other characters. I also love that on top of this being essentially a straight up action comedy, there's also this great mystery involved that really has huge ramifications for Marvel as a whole. So I'm very curious to see how that plays out and where maybe this doesn't end up being such a small story. But
Yeah, I'm kind of a sucker for a mystery comic, like not where we know the hero needs to know, but like where we're trying to figure it out, and not on a cosmic level, just like I mean, there's a DC story, Identity Crisis, like years ago that was basically that, and that really made me fall in love with modern comics. So I'm a sucker for this kind of story. I'm, once again, read it after Ten of Swords, which has its own sense of levity, but at the same time, this is much more grounded and yeah, Deadpool-esque or MODOK-esque or whatever. Like unlike Deadpool, these characters can get serious as like they are in the video game, but at the same time, they're perfectly comfortable being silly too. And because part of the anyone who's crazy can be silly.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's exactly what Taskmaster is, which, by the way, if you're not familiar with Taskmaster's abilities, he can just mirror anyone's skill set and just do exactly what they do. So makes him an incredibly dangerous killer who, has just been a wildly violent character throughout Marvel history. And now he's, has a Dolly Parton ringtone while he's driving a golf cart. So it's a really funny story, and I'm excited to see how this one plays out. This is a series I definitely want to follow along with.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got a couple stories coming out of the upcoming release of the Spider-Man Miles Morales video game.
Yeah, the game, which comes out tomorrow, November 12th. They released a launch trailer for it earlier this week, which, I mean, everything about this game looks amazing. The visuals, the soundtrack, just the fact that we're getting a Miles Morales story. I don't know if we touched on this last week, but they showed off the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse suit will be in the game, and they changed the way they animate the character when you wear that suit, which is amazing. So yeah, this game just looks like a lot of fun. If you haven't checked out the first Marvel Spider-Man game, it's maybe my favorite game ever. It was just, everything about it was amazing, spectacular, whatever Spider-Man adjective you want to use. And so this one is more of a spin-off, I guess, than a sequel. So, I would expect it to be every bit as good as the last.
Yeah, I've heard it's like a smaller game. In video games, at least in the franchise I pick, like there's like Kingdom Hearts 1, 2, and 3, and then there's like the middle tiles, and this is in the middle. This isn't Spider-Man 2. This is not meant. The time to play will be shorter. It's that doesn't take away the fact that it could be a great game. But just you got the scope is the scope. But yeah, I'm looking forward to playing. I have not played the original Spider-Man game just because it came out pre-COVID when I didn't have time. So
Right.
now I'm looking forward to doing that game and then getting into this one.
Yeah, and speaking of the scope of this game too, I mean, the trailer and the extended gameplay footage they showed recently does show off villains like Rhino, a very different version of the Tinkerer, and the Prowler as well. So, I mean, there's going to be, some major Spider-Man players in this one. So I'm excited.
Also, if you want shoes that match your video game, Adidas is doing online.
Yeah, Miles clearly has that style, right? They made it a point to show off his sneakers in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and now Adidas is getting in on that game as well with some pretty awesome Miles-inspired sneakers.
So we've been waiting for this forever. We finally got more information about WandaVision, including that Disney legend Dick Van Dyke consulted with Kevin Feige, head of Marvel Studios, following a D23 Expo about how to get that sitcom authenticity. I mean, if you look at this picture here, it looks like Rob and Laura sleeping. Rob and Laura Petrie sleeping on their beds, like a classic episode of the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Yeah, I knew you were gonna love that that piece of information to come out of that big Entertainment Weekly story. To me, the big coolest thing about it was that they've actually filmed the premiere episode in front of a live studio audience, classic sitcom style. I love that. That's so awesome. They also said that the crew showed up in 1950s style, attire.
Wow.
Really get everybody in the mood for that sort of thing, which awesome. It was such a cool story. Elizabeth Olsen specifically mentioned too how weird it was for her because she grew up visiting the set of Full House, which her sisters were working on. So that's funny, sort of full circle. I don't even know what else to say going into. I just want this show.
Yeah, if I was a betting man, I would bet we're getting a release date tomorrow. So I'm with you. I just can't wait. And it's for all those people that keep saying Marvel's the same, every movie's the same. This is not the same.
No, it's going to be very different.
No, thanks to the magic of the 21st Century Fox acquisition, Disney now has access to this guy.
Yeah, Predator. They announced a while back, if you remember, that they're going to be doing their own original Predator and Alien versus Predator stories in Marvel Comics. But they are also releasing an omnibus of all of the previous Predator comics, something by Dark Horse Comics, and they came up with this new original cover for it as well. This is awesome. I'm a huge fan of the Predator. I think he's probably the coolest / scariest thing that has ever been thought up by anyone anywhere. So yeah, just an awesome character. I'm excited to get the new Marvel stories, but this is also a really cool piece to add to your comic collection, especially if you're a sci-fi fan in general.
Yeah, and then speaking of the 90s.
Yeah, a bunch of legendary X-Men writers are returning to kind of wrap up some of the most famous dangling X-Men storylines throughout history. So I know Chris Claremont was on the list. Who else did we have?
Peter David.
Peter David was on there. Larry Hama. So pretty cool that they are taking these classic X-Men stories, writing new stories that are still set, right in those storylines, even all these years later. So a really cool concept, and I'm excited to get back with what X-Men is and how much we've been reading X-Men lately. I'm really looking forward to getting back to simpler. You mention it all the time that you want just the X-Men team, and we don't get that anymore. I'm really excited to get back to those X-Men.
Yeah, it's weird not to have we're reading a lot of X-Men and none of it feels like the X-Men. Not that it's bad.
Right. It's different. It's just it's very different. And we've been reading. I think we've read 8 consecutive X-Men, quote unquote X-Men stories without seeing Charles Xavier at all. So, just looking forward to getting back to that sort of team.
So I think that's a wrap from what we had planned. Obviously, the big news we're still waiting on is coming from when WandaVision will be announced. And I do want to give a shout out. If you listen to the Marvel's official podcast, Marvel's the Pull List, they do a great reading club this week with Chris Claremont talking about Days of Future Past, which was really interesting. It was really interesting to hear him tell that story from his perspective and at a time when comics were made in a completely different way. So anything you got to say before we wrap up?
Well, I did just want to show off this guy real quick. One of the new Marvel Legends series Venom figures. We just got the whole collection over here. You know how much of a Venom nerd I am, so I'm excited to show those guys off. Keep an eye out for an unboxing video sometime in the near future. Also next week, next Friday, I believe, Marvel 616 hits Disney Plus. So also keep an eye out for a review and recaps for that as well. I'm excited for Marvel 616. That is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm kind of waiting to watch them when they debut So I'm looking forward to catching that. But also on Friday, you will have coverage of the Hasbro Marvel panel that's going on Hasbro Pulse. So
yeah, so a lot more exciting Marvel stuff coming as we wait for the big Marvel stuff.
And then just finally, I'm just going to double check before I say something wrong. Yeah, on Tuesday, you'll also be we also will have coverage of the D23's Marvel 616 panel, as well as celebrating 80 years of Captain America. So a lot going on. Next week's crazy. Next week's the calm is over. We are now in crazy mode.
Yeah, we're right back into the craziness.
So anyway, thanks so much for joining us. We will be back live in just about an hour and a half with the Barely Necessities merchandise show with Becca and Rebecca. And then
that show makes me self-conscious about the name of our show.
Yeah, our show is just, what are we going to call our Marvel show?
I don't know. We might have to work on
a better name. We could rebrand. It's about time we have a new number one.
Right. Yeah, we should end up having a Marvel Time and then subtitle number one.
Right. Yeah.
Just to confuse everybody.
Marvel Time Annual. And then if we could do an editing job and get the Marvel Time Omnibus.
Perfect.
So anyway, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you back here in just a little bit.
Bye.